Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 160 and we are in this stage of the format. We look at the data 4 days after the set was released, and we're going to be looking at what makes the Edge of Eternities tick and what you might have missed and what is maybe surprising and what is not so surprising, and which archetypes need which cards, and so on and so on and so on. Obviously, before we go into that, thanks very much for to all the patrons. We have 2 new patrons this week. Evan and Roctimus Prime have joined the team. Welcome back in one case and welcome in the other case. So thanks very much. Obviously, Patreon is what keeps me going. So if you have spare cash lying around, please do join. Also, I normally don't talk about it, but I thought I will put the plug. I do have a YouTube channel. It would be nice if you can subscribe to it. I do have, I am on all the podcast feeds that you can imagine. If I'm not, then let me know and I will be there. So you can leave me a comment or something, or like a review. That always helps to develop the podcast further. And with that out of the way, let's move to the episode. And we're going to start with the preamble. And this is based on the question I got on the Patreon. By the way, I also have a not on the Patreon, on Discord. By the way, I also have a Discord. You can join it, and it's free, and it's fun, and there's a lot of very interesting people there. Also, you get updates when I go live, so you will know, because Discord will ping you and annoy you, and it will let you know that I'm there. But the question was, why exactly is the early data less reliable than the late format data? And there is so many reasons. I didn't answer that question on the Discord because I thought that would make a great preamble. But there's at least 6 good reasons. First of all, early days, we don't know what we're doing. People will tell you that, oh yeah, we did the set review and blah, 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 and the format is solved on day 1, but it's never the truth. It's never the truth. We're still putting wrong cards in the decks. We are experimenting. We're, confused about the themes. And all of those things will impact how the data, how the decks look like. And because those decks are far, far from optimal, far from optimal, people pick wrong cards all the time, that will have an impact on the data. And that will mean that some cards are not put in their optimal home. Some cards are not going to be fully utilized. Wrong cards will piggyback on the fact that, we drafted this amazing green deck with all the right cards and a couple of clunkers in there. Those clunkers will get their win rate boosted by being in absolutely wrong place, even though probably you had better cards in the sideboard that would complement your deck better. Second reason, early format is also where we get less invested players playing more. If you go to the late format, it's all the familiar names, and they will generate the bulk of the data, which means it's going to be high quality players with good knowledge, and that improves the quality. Early in the format, you get less invested players, the ones that will play 4 or 5 drafts at the beginning of the format, and some of them do have 17 lands, and that data will be a bit more messy because less invested players maybe don't play limited as much, and they have not have all the heuristics that you should have and stuff like that. Third reason is that early format is we are still in the stage of dynamic metagame, which means the pick orders are changing. Normally, when you look at the format, you have day 1, and from day 1 until roughly day 14, and it's very reproducible across the formats. Around 2 weeks it takes for the arena metagame to stabilize. You have shifts. Some cards go up, some in pick orders, some cards go down in the pick orders. And because of that, we are not observing a stable system. And if you're observing a non-stable system, things change day to day because the pick orders change. So, maybe alpha of one card drops from 5 to 3 across that period. And with one card, it's not a problem. But if multiple cards from the same color drop from alpha 5 to alpha 3, that color all of a sudden becomes heavily contested. So you won't get the kind of, very open lanes when you can pick, 4 Galactic Wayfarers in a draft or something. After 2 weeks, this stabilizes. And that's why I usually, for the later analysis, I cut off the first 2 weeks and I only look at week 2 and further, because then I know I'm observing a static metagame where Alsa stays roughly the same for almost all cards. There's like very rare examples of cards that were late format bloomers where people started seeing that it's good after those 2 weeks. The obvious thing that's something that people latch onto very quickly is that early data will have smaller sample sizes. Now, most of the time, I think that the sample sizes are large enough. It's the quality of the data provided in those sample sizes that is a bigger problem, but you cannot ignore that, especially at the higher rarities, sample sizes will be small. And, I thought about doing analysis for some cards, but I couldn't find enough data to see game and head win rates, especially the win rates for specific color pairs. So those will be, especially prone to smaller sample sizes, especially earlier in the format. Another thing is bad builds. When you start drafting a new format, you are going to be very frequently basing what you're trying to do on the signpost uncommons. They're called signposts because they are the signs that point you into certain directions. So I don't know, the Golgari is supposed to be a graveyard deck in this format. Now, we knew very early that there is no support for that archetype, but if someone is not like listening to set reviews and they see the signpost they drafted and they think that they should do something with the graveyard, they might end up with the non-existing deck and the build is going to be bad. Or I don't know, some deck may be sold as an aggressive deck, but it's actually a mid-range, and people will try to build overly aggressive versions of it that just don't do very well, and stuff like that will happen early on. Also, early in the format is the time where we should be, at least according to my philosophy of how the game operates, we should be experimenting. And because you experiment, you take some losses through the experimentation. You pick this rare for science and you try to build around it, and that results in a lower win rate. And I especially can feel it because I do like to experiment early in the format. But of course, this also means that those early format decks are not going to be by far optimal, and that will impact the win rate. So these are at least 6 reasons why early data is less reliable. I would say that the dynamic situation of the metagame and the lack of knowledge are the 2 main contributing factors, but all the other ones are also, in some extent, important. Now, this is not to say that the early data is useless, and it's very far from being useless. The fact that it's less reliable doesn't mean that it's not very useful. It's very useful because we, A, don't have the knowledge, which means that any information is valuable, and B, good cards, independently of the bad builds, experimentation, smaller sample sizes, they do tend to go to the top and stay there for the remainder of the format, which is probably like 4 weeks in the current economy. And this is something that will also, like, people often say, oh, well, the early data, we can discredit it. No, you should never discredit it. It's been predictably showing what is good in the format, and it will not show you all the new ones. The new ones will come with the later data, but it will definitely fill the void of information that you have currently, which is due to the very small sample sizes you are playing as well. And let's not forget about it that you can complain all you want about small sample sizes of the 17Lands data, but your personal sample size is petite, tiny, minuscule compared to what 17Lands data has accumulated right now. Because currently we're sitting at 177,000 games, I think, after 4 days, which is not nothing. So yeah, don't ignore the data at all. Which you haven't if you're here, because we are going to talk about the early data specifically. And normally what I start with is this kind of general overview of the format. And first thing, I look at the play rate of each color. And this means what percentage of the decks will contain, with a couple of assumptions. It's very hard to calculate it exactly, but we don't know how many decks there are, for example, but we only know how many games there are. And obviously decks will have multiple colors, so it's sometimes hard to get the exact number, but this is very close to what it is. And in a perfectly balanced format like we had last time, Final Fantasy was perfectly balanced in many aspects, win rate and play rate alike. Here we have some disproportions. So there are 2 colors that are definitely overdrafted by the 17Lands users. This doesn't mean that it's overdrafted by all the users, because 17Lands users are just a subgroup of players. But a subgroup that is well informed and wins more than the average win rate would suggest. So definitely worth looking at what they're doing. And I did this graph after 2 days, and blue and black were on top, and green was sort of middling. But the first data showed people corrected for it. They noticed green is really, really strong in this format. Or, okay, maybe I don't want to exaggerate. Green is strong. I think it is the best color. It's not the best color by far. It's not like a runaway slam dunk like it was in Ether Drift, which some people like to compare this format. It is strong, though, and it's pretty solid at common. And I think that part of what wins in this format is linked with green, and that is big, dumb chunkers, and you can't ignore that. Also, green is the one color that has access to semi-decent fixing in a set without much fixing at all. And after 4 days, you can see that green is the most commonly drafted color by 17Lands user, 21.6%. So 1.6 percentage points higher than that average that you would expect. And blue is roughly the same, 21.5. Then black is exactly as it should be in the perfectly balanced format, 20%. Red is at 19%, and white is at 18%, lagging behind. So how does it convert to win rates? And first of all, average win rate is 54.9, which is relatively low for 17Lands. And that tells you that even though there are good players, and they are certainly above average, average win rate will be 50%, 17Lands players are struggling a bit. Normally, that early in the format, I would expect something closer to 55.5, 56% win rate. So we see like quite a large difference. Green has 56.1. And I see in the chat already someone writing 56 holy, and then we don't know holy what, but holy something. In Ether Drift, green at this stage of the format was at 57.4. It was slightly higher win rate, but it was the advantage between green and the second color was higher. It was 1.6 percentage points. Here, the second best color, 55% blue, is just 1.1 percentage points behind. So it's not as pronounced the advantage that green has as it was in Ether Drift. And all the other colors are relatively close to each other. So like blue is 55, white is 54.8. And black and red are 54.1. And what it tells me is that, yes, green is the strongest color, quite decisively, but it's not like the color to draft. You shouldn't be interested in anything else. I think that this format, at least from the data that I've seen so far, it looks like a lot of the issue is people not building the decks right, and that will mean that archetypes that are easy to figure out, and I think that Simic is relatively easy to figure out in this format, are going to have an early advantage just because they are built correctly. Other decks are built very incorrectly quite often, and that will, have a result on the win rate. For example, Dimir, I drafted it twice. I got very easy 7-1s both times. Even though Dimir, according to the 17Lands data, is one of the worst archetypes. And I know that Protocols had the same situation with Blue-Red, which has a low win rate, but Alex managed to trophy with it several times and had no problems with it. I think that a lot of the results from those early days are because of one of those reasons I mentioned earlier in the preamble, bad builds, and not understanding what this deck should be doing and how it should achieve its personal goals. One thing of note is that white is the third best color, but it's decisively the least drafted one. So it is underdrafted still. It was underdrafted in my day 2 data. It is still underdrafted now after 4 days. And I think that there is something in there. And I think white is better than people give it credit for. And Kazin has a very good point that people might be too focused on trying out the infinite combo and forget to build a solid black-red deck. Still, I think that at least the good side effect of building an infinite combo deck is that you put Beckoners in your deck, and Beckoner is actually quite a solid card. I've seen people do absolutely outrageously gross things with the Beckoner, and yeah, I'm very impressed by the card so far myself. And I was thinking that it's going to be a complete garbage, so there you go. I played it in my trophy decks. It was excellent. Okay. Oh, I didn't change the title of the slide. It always slips me this one. I didn't. I never. Yeah. I should change the format. Change the format of those slide titles because I leave them behind from the old presentation. But anyway, EOE is a 2-color format, quite decisively, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And there's no good fixing in this set. There is no tools to make a consistent 3-color deck when you have to base on the basic land mana basis. And 72.6% of the decks are 2 colors purely without any splashing, and further 19% are 2 colors and a splash. And together that makes up for almost 92% or 91.5% of all the decks are 2 colors or 2 colors and splash. And the remaining 8.5%, most of them are 3-color decks, and then there's like 3% of the decks are monocolor or monocolor with splash. And there's almost nothing in the 3-color splash, 4-color, 5-color decks that they just don't exist. And that's what you should be doing in this set. Draft 2 colors, maybe splash something, especially if you're like in green as the. Oh yeah, no, that's also not correct. That should be play rate. Here should be win rate. And in terms of the win rates, well, first of all, the 2-color decks are going to be the bulk of all the decks. So they have a 55.2% win rate, which is close to the average win rate for the format. Not a surprise if 70% of all the decks are 2-color. Monocolored with the splash, 57.6%. They are the highest win rate decks. Now, the problem with that is, of course, I can tell you that, oh, yeah, it's good to be monocolor, and that would be a very truism kind of statement. You can't really decide to be a monocolor deck. There is no tools to reliably draft a monocolor deck. If you are in a lane where it's so open, one of the colors, that you can draft almost a monocolor deck, good on you. Abuse that, use it. It's going to be pretty good probably if you are in that particular lane. But it won't happen reliably. You have to be opportunistic and spot that in order to get there. But all the other 2 colors in a splash, 3 colors in a splash decks are winning less than 2 colors. 2 colors in a splash have a 54.4% win rate. Mind, most 2 colors in splash decks are Simic splashing blue or Gruul splashing, Simic splashing red or Gruul splashing blue. It's a Timur kind of format in terms of going for more than 2 colors. And, it makes sense. Those colors have lander tokens. And because of that, because they are actually the most winning decks, that 2 colors in the splash category is going to have a decent 54.4% win rate. But that doesn't mean that you should be experimenting with the 2 colors in a splash Azorius decks, because that's not going to work in exactly the same way. 3-color decks, 52.3, so markedly lower. And 3 colors in a splash go back to 54.2. Smallish sample size of around 800, 900 decks. But there might be something in there. There might be like a way of drafting a multicolor deck. Once there's going to be enough numbers on this kind of thing, it will be maybe worth looking at what makes those multicolor decks tick. In terms of popularity of the 2-color combinations, and as I said, 92% of the decks are in that category, because I'm looking at both the ones with the splash and without the splash. And it's actually quite even. Like Boros and Golgari are drafted the least, like 6 and 7% of the time. Average, as you would expect, should be around 10% for the 10-color combinations, if they consist 100% of the 2-color decks. And the most popular deck, Simic, is 12.2, which is slightly above the average, but we've seen formats where it was 25% already at this stage of the format. So it's not by far overdrafted as of yet. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be changing slightly in the next days. You probably next week, the Simic decks are going to be 16% because 17Lands users are pretty opportunistic. And you also see that like decks like Rakdos, Dimir, which don't have a high win rate, we're going to come to that in a second, are drafted quite a lot. And this is the artifact from the first days of the format where people were drafting them more. I think that those numbers go down in the future, which makes me very optimistic for Dimir. I think it's a very strong deck color combination. I drafted it successfully and looking forward to finding it more open. And then, like Gruul 11.7, Dimir 11.8, Rakdos 11.9. They're all quite close to each other. And then, like Selesnya, Azorius 10.8, 10.6, still, drafted as they should be, basically close to the perfectly balanced format numbers. And Orzhov Izzet at 9.5, 8.5 are slightly below that curve. But they are all pretty close, apart from Boros and Golgari, which are slightly lagging behind. So it seems like, based on how people are drafting, if you find an open lane, you can find an open lane, pretty solid color combinations still in this format. Team Murdoch, you got a pick 9 depressurized today and had to wonder if I'm overvalued. I almost first picked it. I had that situation a couple of times already, and I didn't. As I said, I played 6 drafts. So depressurized somehow. Some people don't value it high, and if you are in a pot that doesn't value depressurized high, you're in for the good times in black. So I kept the order in the win rate graph of the color pairs the same as a popularity order. So Simic, the most popular archetype, it is also the most winning one, 57.4. But then we see 2 colors, Rakdos and Dimir, with 53.7 and 54, that are popular among 17Lands users in terms of drafting, but they don't win very much. And then we have like Gruul and Selesnya, which are the second tier of color pairs by win rate at 56.23. Azorius and Orzhov at 55. And back in the back, the least popular but also the least winning ones, Izzet, Golgari, and Boros at 53, 54, 52, that kind of range. But it means that, I think that 5 archetypes are winning the most currently: Simic, Gruul, Selesnya, Azorius, and Orzhov. So green-blue, red-green, green-white, white-blue, white-black. And the rest is slightly lagging behind. And, this average win rate is 54.9. What else? Well, that covers, I think, that this early general colors overview. And I can see that people are getting surprised by those win rates. And I think that those win rates at this stage are not very representative of the color pair strength yet. I think that generally Simic, Gruul, and Selesnya are the easiest ones to figure out. Azorius also is relatively easy to figure out, but Dimir, Rakdos, I think that my feeling at least is that Dimir is way more strong than Rakdos is, but Dimir is harder to build because you have to ignore the artifact synergies and just focus on building a solid control deck with a lot of card advantage. And hopefully we'll see it by looking at the best cards, best commons, best uncommons. So first we're going to look at the each color, and we're going to look at, again, best bombs. And bombs, I define them as cards that have a game in hand win rate of over 61%. Top uncommons for each color and top commons for each color, just to see what's going on in them. And then we will dive into the color pairs. So in terms of bombs, white has 2. Cosmogrant Zenith, 3 mana, 2/4. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you can choose, make 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, including the Cosmogrant Zenith. A card is obviously busted. It can generate a lot of value. If you can play it on turn 4 with a second spell, you definitely got some value, even if opponent points removal at Cosmogranite Zenith as soon as they can. You have the option to always trigger it at least once. And if you do that, definitely you got a lot of value out of it. So yeah, pick this card, play it. It's going to be great. It makes wide boards. It can pump your whole team. It's like does a lot of very good things. The second one is a bit more surprising. Sunstar Chaplain, 2 mana 3/2. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. And also you can pay 2, remove a counter from a creature you control, and then you tap target artifact or creature. So, you play it on turn 2. It's a solid attacker. If you had a 1-drop, you might do some beautiful things, or if you have some ways of tapping it. I think that in Selesnya decks, it's a really, really good card with the with Gene Pollinator, because you can play Gene Pollinator on turn 1. Turn 2, you can cast Sunstar Chaplain. You can use the mana from take the mana from Gene Pollinator, and you got a counter on something, either Sunstar Chaplain or the Gene Pollinator itself. And since you build the Chaplain to be a bigger creature, next turn you can attack with it, and you can repeat the situation with the Gene Pollinator and put more counters on something else. So it can spiral out of control with the Gene Pollinator very easily. But judging by the numbers, it can also spiral out of control with literally anything. So definitely a strong card, and it might not look like it's like super strong. And there are a couple of cards that are just not in that 61% range, but not far from it. I think that the Lumen class Frigate is one of them that barely missed the threshold I set for the bombs. That is also a solid one. That's the one that can give Anthem to the team if you crew it. And if you crew it more, it becomes like a 3/5 lifelinker flyer. Top commons in white. 2 are very close. Banishing Light and Night Luminary. Banishing Light obviously is Banishing Light. Night Luminary is the 4 mana 3/2. When it enters, you make a 1/1, and it has warp for 1 and a white, so you can warp it, and then you make a 1/1. This one gets to exile. You can recast it later. Very solid. I slightly underestimated how good that card is going to be. And I'm yet to play it, but I've seen it doing really good work. I think Mark Anderson drew my attention to the fact that it's a great combo with Hyler Blade, the black equipment, if you're playing white-black, where you can play Hyler Blade on turn 1, then you warp Night Luminary, the Void trigger of Hyler Blade triggers at the end of turn, and your 1/1 instantly becomes equipped with this massive sword and can start attacking and threatening opponent's life total. It will require a block, where the block will mean that you can move Hyler Blade to something else for free. And you can start this chain of events that puts opponent in Abyss as long as you have creatures to play. And Focus Fire is the third one. That's the white mana for an instant. It deals X damage to target attacking or blocking creature, where X is 2 plus the number of creatures and spacecraft you control. That will very easily deal like 5 damage. And even on an empty board early in the game, white for dealing 2 to something is a solid ability. In terms of uncommons, All Fate's Stalker is the top white uncommon. That's the 4 mana 2/3, and it has an Oblivion Ring sort of effect. Or Oblivion Ring, whatever. Not Banishing Light. It exiles a creature, non-assassin creature to be specific, because it stops you from making infinite loop with All Fate's Stalker in itself that will break online clients for Magic. But it has a neat ability to warp, which means that, first of all, like if you warp it, you can kill a token on the opponent's sides for 2 mana. Or you can, if you have an ETB, and I counted around 80 good ETB creatures in the set, it can sort of let you reuse the ETB trigger from that particular creature. Also, it can create some mini combos where you can warp a creature, warp the All Fate's Stalker, exile the creature you control. It comes back at the end of the turn, but it comes back as a full value creature. So, like, for example, Starfield Shepherd If you are on turn 4, you can cast Starfield Shepherd for its warp cost, get yourself a Plains or a 1-drop, cast the All Fate Stalker for its warp cost, get yourself a Starfield Shepherd at the end of turn, where it will enter, retrigger, you can get a Plains or another 1-drop, and it's a neat combo. Starfield Shepherd, number 3 uncommon in white, and it's very, very solid. Like the fact that it can draw you a land early in the game and make sure that you don't miss your land drops is very powerful. And later in the game, if you have 1 or 2 1-drops, it can also fetch that, so you get like a card draw on a good solid 3/2 flyer for 5. And the middle one of the uncommons is Rayblade Trooper, 3 mana for a 2/2. When it enters, you put a counter on target creature you control. And whenever a non-token creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you create a 1/1 human soldier creature token. So, you can put the counter on something else, attack with it, maybe trade, you get a 1/1 out of the deal. Or you can put the counter on Rayblade Trooper, and that means that if it's going to be killed, you will get a 1/1 human soldier. Also, it has warp for 1 and a white, which means you can sort of warp it to put a counter on something. Very solid card with very good win rate numbers. Okay, blue. Only 1 blue card crossed the threshold for being a bomb. That was Quantum Riddler. Card is absolutely busted in half. 3 blue for a 4/6 Sphinx with flying. So, and yeah, 4/6 flying for 5, that's already like a way better air elemental. And air elemental, okay, not probably a great card now, but still a card that has to be respected. But it also draws a card at enter that, hey, there's more. First of all, it has warp for 1 and a blue, which means that you can warp it and draw a card. And it also has this ability, whenever you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand, if you would draw 1 or more cards, draw that many cards +1 instead. So if you cast it and you have 1 card in your hand, you will draw 2 cards out of it. If you warp it and you have 1 card in your hand, you will draw 2 cards on it. If it's in the board anyway, and you only have 1 card in your hand, you will just draw 2 for the turn. It's just like so busted, that ability. And, we're talking about a 5 mana 4/6 that draws you a card on ETB and probably drew you a card somewhere earlier in the game when you warped it. So yeah, very strong. Top blue commons, Cryogen Relic is by far the best blue common in terms of the win rate so far. And that's my experience of this card. It still goes relatively late. That's the 1 and a blue for an artifact. When it enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. And it's easy to leave the battlefield because for 1 and a blue, you can sacrifice it and you can put a stun counter on up to 1 target tapped creature. So very easy to get rid of if you need to. But also there are other ways of getting rid of it. And that's like number 2, blue common, Self-Craft Mechan. 3 and a blue for a 3/4. When it enters, you can sacrifice an artifact. For example, Cryogen Relic. I've done it so many times already in this format. And so you sacrifice the relic, you draw a card. But also, whenever you sacrifice this artifact, when Self-Craft Mechan enters, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and draw a card. Lots of the time is going to be a counter on the Self-Craft Mechan because it puts it into a 4/5, which is a huge body in this format. But sometimes you will put it on a flyer. The flexibility on that is also so good. And yeah, drawing a card, obviously everyone likes drawing cards. And the third blue common, Cryo Shatter, blue for an enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets -5/-0, and when it becomes tapped or is dealt damage, destroy it. So literally blue Swords to Plowshares. I told you that I do like Beckoner. One of the reasons why Beckoner is so nice, this is your way of getting rid of Cryo Shatter that opponent played on your creature. Beckoner, when it enters, it gives creature +2/+0, and when that creature dies this turn, it comes back tapped. So if they put Cryo Shatter on your creature, you can just Beckoner, give it +2/+0, attack with it. Since you attack with it, it gets tapped. Since it gets tapped, destroy it. Since it's destroyed, it dies. Since it dies, it returns to the battlefield, and you just got rid of Cryo Shatter without having to have a disenchant in your deck. So go Beckoner in that particular aspect. But still, the card is great. I mean, it's 1 mana for basically a removal. Maybe they will gain like 4 or 5 life. And occasionally it's awkward if the creature's main asset is not its power and toughness, but maybe some other aspects of it, like, I don't know, triggered abilities or something. Uncommons in blue, Codecracker Count. That was an obvious one. It's a better Sipsic Appraiser. 3 mana for a 2/1. When it enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library. You can put one of them in your hand and the other in the graveyard. So exactly like Sipsic Appraiser, but it has Warp for 2 and a blue. So in some situations, you always warp it, catalog yourself, so draw 2, discard. Well, draw 1 and then put 1 in the graveyard. And then you recast it and you do the same. So you got like a lot of card advantage out of it. In some situations, you will play it out as a creature. We knew that it's going to be good almost from the days -5, and it turned out that it is good. Everyone is happy. Mouth of the Storm, on the other hand, not everyone saw the potential of that card, because maybe it is a 7-drop. It's a 7 mana, 6/6 flyer with ward 2. But I think what pushes this card over the edge is when this creature enters, creatures your opponents control get -3/-0 until your next turn. So you play this big dummy. And the problem with those big dummies normally is that, oh yeah, I played the big dummy and now they killed it and now I'm so behind and also I'm taking a ton of damage. Well, here at least you're not taking a ton of damage because the -3/-0 is until your next turn. So you cast it and then the opponents, you pass the turn, opponent's creatures are still going to be smaller. And only after you untap, they will be their normal size again, which means that you have the full turn cycle of sort of immunity. And if they don't kill it, and it's not trivial to kill a 6/6, if they don't kill it, well, then you have a massive flyer that will probably end the game in a hurry. It's a great top end for all the blue decks that will go to a lot of mana. Like, for example, blue-green. And the card goes still quite late. People still did not recognize the quality of the Mouth of the Storm. And number 3 blue uncommon, I was slightly surprised that it's that high. Uthros Psionicist. That's 2 and a blue for a 2/4, and second spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. I know that this card is good because I never managed to draft it, but I played against it a couple of times, and it was backbreaking every single time. Because 2 mana discount every turn on your second spell, that will probably accumulate like 4, maybe 6 mana every game if it doesn't die. And that's a lot of mana advantage. And we know from the analysis of the previous set that if you outspend your opponent on mana, you're going to win the game because you're putting more impactful spells. Because turns out the design team does a good job in evaluating how much mana should a thing cost, which means that the more it costs, the better it is. And which means that if you can cast things that are better for less mana, you're going to put more impactful things on board and win that game through that. And Uthros Psionicist does that pretty well. So I would highly recommend playing that card. Black Bombs. First, my favorite boy this time. I had it in 2 decks and both of them trophied. Elegy Acolyte. And, both of them trophied with a large help from that card, Elegy Acolyte. 4 mana, 4/4 lifelink. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose a life. Terrible, you lose a life. Oh, wait, you have a 4/4 lifelinker. But wait, there's more. There it has Void. At the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So, yeah. You basically attack with something, and the opponent has the lovely choice of, yes, should I trade and give you a robot, or should I let it in and give you a card? And there's never a good answer to that question. And that's why this card wins. If it's not killed on spot, it will just take over the game so hard, so hard. I won from such impossible positions just because Elegy Acolyte saved my bacon there. And the second one is Sunset Saboteur. This one did surprise me. I know it's a solid card, but I didn't expect it to have over 61% win rate compared to all the other cards that are there. I mean, in white, what did we have? We had the Cosmogrant Zenith and the Sunstar Chaplain. Maybe it's comparable to the Chaplain in a way. Sunset Saboteur is a 2 mana 4/1 Menace. It has ward, discard a card, so it's really hard to kill with the spells. And then it has, whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and opponent controls. And I'm so happy to see that, because I really hope that this convinces WotC that, you can make a creature with the downside, and it can still be quite busted and limited, and potentially fun to play because it brings out interesting play patterns. Because yes, putting a counter on a creature an opponent controls is not nothing, and yet still this card manages to get a 61% win rate. So I'm super stoked to see that it is there. But think about it, especially on the play, it's going to hit like a truck. You play it on turn 2, opponent will never have like 2 blockers at that stage. They can swing you for 4. Their creature will get a counter. If you can kill it, bounce it, do whatever with it, you're going to basically undo all the downside, and then you still can smash for 4 again. And if this thing does 12 damage, if a 2-drop does 12 damage, that's pretty good, because you need to find out the way to deal the remaining 8 damage with cards in black that actually are quite good in doing so. Yeah, you can keep pointing at things and killing them straight up, and then the opponent does not have a realistic advantage. But I mean, it is a disadvantage. It's just a disadvantage that if you build your deck right, you can neutralize it, and then you end up with an excellent card that is very hard to kill. I think, interestingly, I'm pretty sure this card would have been bad if not for the ward ability. That ward discard a card is just changing so much on that card. It's such a sweet design in terms of like how to balance the advantages and disadvantages. I'm really impressed by how well it works. In terms of the top black commons, and this is very interesting, Virus Beetle comes on top by a whisker from the Pressurize, but I was quite surprised to see that. Virus Beetle, of course, a reprint from Kamigami on Dynasty. 2 mana 1/1 artifact creature. When it enters, each opponent discards a card. Ravenous Rats as an artifact insect. Still good. That card has been doing well in every format. But I have to keep in mind, you have to keep in mind, the win rates of the black commons are not impressive. And in all fairness, most commons don't have very impressive win rates. It's not a format when you have those busted commons that take over the meta game. We are not even remotely close to anything as strong as Writhing Chrysalis, but we're also not even remotely strong to like top common win rates from previous sets. Commons are way closer to each other. The Pressurize, the best black removal spell, again, not by much from Grafkill. It's an interesting one because it's 2 mana instant speed and it kills a lot. It kills like 80% of common creatures, 80% of uncommons, and I think like 55% of the rares and mythics. It gives target creature -3/-0. And then if that creature's power is 0 or less, you destroy it. So it kills everything with power 3 or less, just like that. And for bigger things, it still can be a combat trick that makes they attack with a 5/5. You block with your 5/5. You depressurize their 5/5. It doesn't die, but it will die in combat, and your creature will survive. So you sort of played it as a removal. Grafkill, on the other hand, is much simpler. It's just 4 mana, exile target creature or spacecraft for instant speed. Just exile things. Just exile till they're dead. And it makes the top 3 of the commons. In terms of uncommons, one is standing head and shoulders above the rest. Dubious Delicacy. That thing is busted. It has like it has over 61% win rate, so it would make it to the list of bombs basically. But I don't put uncommons in the bombs list. I just put the rares and mythics, and that's why it's not there. But it is at that power level. Had a deck with 2 of them, and boy, it's fun. And it's a 3 mana food with flash, so you can cast it at instant speed. When it enters, 1 target creature gets -3/-3. Up to 1 target creature gets -3/-3. You can cast it without targets. That's fine. And then for 2 mana, you can sacrifice it either to gain 3 life or to make target opponent lose 3 life, which is such a good flexibility. I've used this card as my last bastion of defense and managed to survive a game only because I sacrificed the Dubious Delicacy to gain life and managed to stabilize from there. And in some games, I just like, oh, I managed to deal like 17 damage. How will I deal the last 3? Well, there is Dubious Delicacy on the white horse, or maybe on the black horse in this particular case, sorting out my problems. Then the second one is maybe a bit more surprising. It is much lower win rate than the Dubious Delicacy. Fell Grafship, 3 mana for a spacecraft, the first spacecraft we see today. When it enters, you mill 3 cards, and you may return a creature or spacecraft card from your graveyard to your hand. Hopefully, you have a target already when you cast it, but you can always spin the wheels and hopefully to get something. Then it has the station ability that all spacecraft have, so you need to tap something to put counters on it according to the power of the creature you used. And then when it gets 8 of those counters, it becomes a 3/2 flyer with lifelink. And that lifelink, again, has been so crucial for me in some of the games where I could station it, and I was at 2 life or something like that. And then I do 1 swing with the Fell Grafship, puts me to 5, which makes me feel much more comfortable. I might even take 1 more hit from something without having to, making bad blocks just to survive. It's great in that aspect. And, rebuying things, not many tools to do that. And Fell Grafship is one of the things that will enable that quite well. Also, one of the very few mill enablers. And the third one, Monoist Circuit Feeder. That's a 6 mana 4/4 flyer. But when it enters, target creature you control gets +X/+O, and target creature an opponent controls gets -O/-X, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So it is already 1 itself. It's an artifact creature. So at least +1/+O, -O/-1 to something. But most of the time, it's not very hard to get a ton of artifacts in this set. I think there's like 80-ish, maybe 75-ish artifacts in the set. So a good third of all the cards in the set will be, maybe more than a quarter at least, will be artifacts. And, they are focused around black as well. So there's going to be plenty of it. You see the Dubious Delicacy here, Fell Grafship, Virus Beetle on the list of the top commons and top uncommons in black. That's already, like 4 of the 6 cards are artifacts, which means that not only there are artifacts in the set, but they're playable, even, dare I say, good artifacts in there. So yeah, a very strong top end for some decks, and can change the game on its own when you remove a key blocker and then you put more power on the board and you make 1 attack possible. I don't know, you give +4, +5/+0 to a Virus Beetle, all of a sudden it has to be blocked. And if they don't have a chump blocker, well, they have to waste a real creature just to stop Virus Beetle from attacking. Okay, red. Bombs, there's only 1 card that fulfills this criteria, and it's Nova Hellkite. 3 red for a dragon. It's a 4/5 flying haste. When it enters, it pinks something for 1. Only to a creature, not to any target. So keep that in mind. And it has warp for 3. And of course, because it has haste, when you warp it, you can ping something for 1, kill it potentially, and still attack with the Nova Hellkite for 4. That's a very good combo there. Strong card. Didn't play with it, but I played against it once, and it was a pain. In case of top red commons, first, Orbital Plunge might be a surprise to some of you. For those of you that watched the 17Lands data from the first days, it won't be a surprise. 4 mana sorcery deals 6 to target creature, and if it dealt excess damage, so if the creature's toughness was 5 or less, you also create a lander token, and that's, I think, the key part of it. But then the second best red common, I was shocked to see it, but it is Nebula Dragon, the 7 mana 4/4 flyer that deals 3 damage to any target. I was not expecting to see that card in top red commons. And we'll see, hopefully in a second, why that might be the case. It's particularly good in one of the archetypes, and I think that inflates its numbers. But it's worth knowing that this is not a 0 card. It actually is good in some decks. And yeah, again, we're talking about early data, so maybe the sample size is not gigantic, and it might change. But at least I would say you probably shouldn't completely ignore it and just discard it right from the start. And the third one is Zookeeper Mechan. 1 in red for a 1/3 artifact creature robot, and it just taps for red. Or for 7 mana, target creature you control gets +4/+0 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. And when I was evaluating this card before the set was released, I thought, oh, that 7 mana ability is going to be such a throwaway. I mean, maybe I'll activate it once in the whole format. Now, arguably, I still haven't activated it, but mainly because I never played red. I did have it activated against me multiple times in one game, and it was a pain to deal with. I think I could have evaluated it better before the set was released. It actually is a relevant part of the range that the Zookeeper Mechan has. In terms of the uncommons, Terrapact Intimidator, I think that is the only really decisively great uncommon for all the archetypes of its color. I think that it was the best uncommon in every single deck that had red in it from my evaluations. Maybe not in red-green. Maybe not. Maybe there's one that's not. But it is a very solid card. 2 mana, 2/1. Which screams quality. 2 mana, 2/1 is usually what you want to be putting in your deck. Just kidding. But it does a very good ETB. When it enters, target opponent either makes you have 2 lander tokens, which is great. You get 2 pieces of cardboard extra on top of the Terrapact Intimidator. Or they can choose to stop you from having those landers, but they need to put 2 +1/+1 counters on Terrapact Intimidator. So you end up with a 2 mana 4/3. And we looked at the 2 mana 4/1 that was in the bomb area, which makes you maybe understand why Terrapact Intimidator is close to that area. It's a very strong card. Also, you give opponent a choice, which, they will try to pick the optimal thing for themselves, but they may choose wrong. They may give you the game because they made a bad decision there, because they didn't, they didn't know that you have something that will make that 4/3 deal a ton of damage to them. Maybe you have like a removal follow-up or protection spell for the removal that they were planning to cast on it or something. Very strong card. Second best red uncommon, and this is another card that people are still, I think, slightly low on, is Cut Propulsion. This thing kills a lot of things. It's a 3 mana instant. It says target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. If that creature has flying, it deals twice that much damage to itself. And that means that it kills most of the flyers. I think with a couple of examples that situationally actually might be killed by it. It deals with almost all the flyers in the set. And it deals with like a solid chunk of creatures. I think it kills also almost every single spacecraft apart from one. And that one can have a boost in power, can pump itself up, and then you can kill it with Cut Propulsion. So, it is really strong. For 3 mana at instant speed. And I think it kills a good 70% of the creature. But I think very importantly, it kills a lot of big creatures in the set. And normally red has a problem with killing those. But now Cut Propulsion together with Orbital Plunge can deal with majority of the large creatures. And the last one, Territorial Brunter, massive 6/6 reach, and it has a very interesting landfall. That landfall says whenever a land you control enters, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast this card this turn. The fact that it always will hit a spell, always something hopefully relevant if you built your deck right, is making a big difference from getting this normal impulse draw when most of the time it's just going to be another land. And since you already played a land this turn, that land is going to be almost automatically bin. So a good play on that ability. And body is also big, and big bodies are not terrible in this format. Okay, green bombs, one made the list. And this is the set with the fewest cards that made my 61% game in hand win rate criterion. So yeah, doesn't seem like there is a ton of amazing bombs in this format. But Urboroi definitely is one. It has like 67% win rate. It's a 4-mana 1/3. Again, this stat line doesn't scream amazing, but the ability significantly changes how you evaluate the card. The ability is, at the beginning of your combat, on each of your turns, you put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is this creature's power. So starts as a 1/3, but you go to combat. If opponent was tapped, they can't do anything about it. And you put counters on everything you have, plus on Uroboroid, which means that next turn it will be putting 2 +1/+1 counters on everything if it survives. So if that card survives a couple of turns, game is over. And that's why it has such a high win rate, because sometimes it will just naturally survive. Opponent didn't draw the right removal. Yeah, maybe you had Dubious Delicacy, but you were tapped out, and then it becomes a 2/4, and because of that, you can't kill it with a Dubious Delicacy, and it will become a 4/6 next turn, and all your team is going to get massive. So yeah, very strong card that spirals out of control. And actually, that was the design's part of the design of the card, was that they wanted this Uroboroid, the Uroboros being this infinite snake that eats its own tail. They wanted to represent infinity in some way. And the fact that Uroboroid grows exponentially means that it sort of tries to get to infinity as fast as physically possible, which is a neat combo. Neat design as well. Green top commons, and the green does have the top common of this set in Galactic Wayfarer. 3 mana 3/3. When it enters, create a lander token. Such a simple design, such a good design. Just 3/3, but with a good upside of basically ramping you at some stage of the game. Maybe even fixing you at some stage of the game. And the 3/3 body is relevant, so that's why it's so successful. Second green common, maybe a bit more surprising, but it's Biosynthetic Burst. 2 mana combat trick. It's an instant. You put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains reach, it gains trample, it gains indestructible until end of turn, and then you untap that creature, which is a lot of things that happen. The only thing it doesn't give is hexproof, which I have to say I sometimes missed it, because it's still good. You can give indestructible to that creature. Dubious Delicacy will still kill it. Exile removal will still kill it. So make sure that you keep that in mind. But yeah, very solid trick. I think particularly good in Selesnya decks, and that inflates its win rate, where it also gives you a counter which is somewhat within the theme of the color combination. But sometimes it will just, you play it on a massive creature and give it trample to push more damage through. And the last one on the list of the green top commons is Gene Pollinator. Green for a 1/2 artifact creature robot insect, and you tap it and untap permanent you control, and then you add 1 mana of any color. Now, we've seen Jaspera Sentinel, we've seen Citadel Stalwart. It's a similar card, but there's so much more to it. And if you really want to learn more about it, I highly recommend the last episode of Rough Drafts from Sam Pratt. Whole episode is dedicated to different builds of Gene Pollinator, and to say that I drafted a deck that had 4 Gene Pollinators and I left all 4 of them in the sideboard. That was a conscious choice. I knew that I either want to play 4 of them or 0 of them, and I went for the version of the deck that wanted to use 0 of them. But then I asked Sam how would he build the 4 Gene Pollinator version of the deck, and it looked sweet. Somewhat regret that I chickened out of building a 4 Gene Pollinator deck. Do I have a link to Sam's podcast? No, I don't have it in my hand, but just find in your podcast provider Rough Drafts, and I'm sure that will pop out, and then give it a listen when you have time. Great, because it's very short, which means that you can. I usually for the short walk with my dog on a day. If rough drafts are out, I'm definitely going to give them a listen. Green uncommons, and I mean, look at that list. Top green uncommons. We have a 7 mana 6/6, a 6 mana 5/7, and a 5 mana XX, which is also a lot. 4 big dumb beasts, and these are the backbone of the good green uncommons. Glacier Godmaw, the Crater Hoof at home, 7 mana 6/6 trample. When it enters, you create a lander, and then it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, creatures you control get +1/+1, vigilance, and haste until end of turn. So you can either play it on turn 7, and then you have a lander which guarantees that you can boost your team next turn, or maybe double boost your team. Or you cast it on turn 8, play a land, and it instantly attacks as a 7/7 vigilant trampler. And all of those options are great. And that's why it is the top green uncommon. Second one, it's 6 mana 5/7 with reach, but it does have an additional layer of abilities, and that says that this spell costs 2 less to cast if your opponents control 3 or more creatures. So if your opponent has a good opening, not only you neutralize it by dropping a 5/7, but probably you turn the corner very quickly from there. And this must be such a back-breaking thing to see when you're playing an aggressive deck and you guys are like, oh yeah, 1 drop into 2 drop into 3 drop, and then now, bam, 5/7 reach. Deal with that. And judging by the high win rate, very often people don't. So yeah. And last one is Harmonious Grove Strider. That's a 5 mana XX with Ward 2. I think Ward 2, again, very important in that card. It would be so much worse without it, when people could probably kill it for cheap. And it says this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. And games in this format can go long enough, and there's enough landers that it can become like a 9/9, 10/10, 11/11. And at that stage, it becomes an abyss for the opponent. They have to chump it every turn, throwing away their creatures, and it just takes over the game. Sometimes they will kill it, but even if they kill it, how often are they going to be up on mana with that? Not that often. I mean, maybe they can cast the 1 mana removal spell, but then they have to sacrifice something that they spend mana on and play 2 extra mana, and most of the time it will mean that they are even on the mana that they spend. So yeah, Harmonious Growth Strider, Ward pushes it over the limit, because if you have to spend 6 mana to kill their 5-drop, you're not ahead on that exchange. All right. And that covers the color analysis. And now we can move to a bit more specific color pairs analysis. And we start with looking at the Signpost uncommons. And there's only 10 of them in the set, so we can go through every single one of them. But there is one that is standing head and shoulder above the rest, the Biomech Engineer. That's the blue-green 2/2 that when it enters makes a lander, and for 8 mana draws a card and makes a 2/2 robot. 61.9, which comfortably crosses the bomb threshold that I set for the set. Card is really, really strong. Best uncommon in the set altogether. Above the Dubious Delicacy. Very strong card. And it's partially linked to what green is doing. And we saw that best uncommons in green are those big dumb beasts. And lots of good commons in green are also big dumb beasts. Big dumb beasts are called big dumb beasts because they don't generate any value. So they need to be killed with removal. But if you kill it with removal, probably you're ahead on that exchange. Biomech Engineer is a small, cheap creature that will often require removal. If your opponent has only removal that kills big things and has to use it on the Biomech Engineer, I will greatly increase the odds that later in the game they will not have the removal for your big dumb beasts. And that's part of the charm of the Biomech Engineer. No one wants that thing in the board, because it's a disaster waiting to happen if they manage to activate it even once and draw 2 cards and make a 2/2 out of the deal. You're going to be so behind in that game. So people proactively kill it, but sometimes they will use like a graph kill on it. Sometimes they will use like a proper like orbital plunge on it. And that might mean that one of your big dumb beasts that you're going to cast later is going to survive thanks to it and take over the game, not because of the value it generates, but just because of the pure stats that it has. So that is the neat part of the Biomechan Engineer's charm. Then we have Station Monitor, the white-blue wannabe Clarion Spirits, but it's still very good, 59.3. Sir Vondam, the white-black 4/4 Lifelinker Death Touch that gives +1/+0 and Death Touch to your team when it enters or attacks, 59%. And Alfariel, Dreaming Acolyte, the Dimir one, has 58.9, 59 basically. And these three are the sort of like second tier of the Signpost uncommons. Then we have the third tier in Halia, the Selesnya one, Tanuk, the Gruul one, and Interceptor Mechan, the Rakdos one, at between 57 and 6 and 56 and 6. Siege Ship Brute Tender, that's the Golgari one at 56. That's still okay. And two that are slightly behind, and that's Manamanon Uthros Exile, the blue-red one for a 1/3. And whenever an artifact enters, you can put a +1/+1 counter on something. And Sami Ship's Engineer, the Boros one at 52. And that's already like both of those are definitely an underperformer in terms of how much you would expect from a Signpost uncommon. Now, I don't know if Sami Ship's Engineer will improve over time, or maybe we'll find decks that are good for it. But definitely the current builds of Boros are, well, first of all, they are not successful at all. And second of all, Sami's is also not successful in those builds. So maybe you should rethink how you want to be building Boros. And I'm a bit optimistic on trying to build this sort of like big red kind of versions of Boros decks where I'm relying on late game and building it as a control deck. And I think that there might be tools to do that if you find them. And these are going to be the decks where like the Nebula Dragon is going to be good, and the Orbital Plunge is going to be a key card, and I don't want to be aggressive at all. I just want to play my 1/3s that give mana or something. So all of those things, I'm theory crafting here, but I think that's how I would try to build my Boros decks, not as an aggressive deck, but as a controlling deck, maybe upper layers of the mid-range. There are problems with that because it just doesn't have enough massive creatures that like green has access to, so it has to be maybe more creative with how it's going to win those games. Okay, and that covers all of the stuff that I want to do with the monocolor cards and multicolor cards. And we go back to our color pair power, but I reordered them instead of from the most popular drafted to the least popular drafted. I just ordered them from the most winning one to the least winning one. And we're going to go through all of them in the order from the most winning to the least winning. We're going to look at commons and uncommons, and we're going to look at the best common, hidden gem, and the trap card. And then the same for the uncommons, best uncommon, hidden gem, and the trap card. With best just being the highest win rate card. And hidden gem and trap are arbitrarily selected by me as card that maybe goes a bit late still, but has a very good number, or has good numbers in terms of the win rate. Or maybe a card that does not seem intuitively like it fits in the deck, but it actually does. And the trap, same, a card that either looks like it should be in that deck, but actually does atrociously badly in it, or maybe a card that is put in the deck quite frequently, but does not bring the results. So these are going to be those gems and traps. So let's start with the top win rate color pair, Simic. And the top common there, very unsurprisingly, is the Galactic Wayfarer. 62.2% win rate. That's very, very high. For a common card, it does everything that the color pair wants to be doing. It provides a body that is assertive and gives you opportunity to ramp to high mana value cards that will seal the deal for you, while still providing a clock that needs to be dealt with, and usually through the means of removal, which means that there will be one removal less for the big cards later in the game. The hidden gem I selected is the Pinnacle Kill Ship. And I think that, and I'm going to show you some analysis at the end of it as a sort of bonus analysis that I tried to always put in those early early data episodes. But in the set review on the limited level ups, Mark Anderson said something that stuck in my head, that there will be decks in this format that want Pinnacle Kill Ship, and there will be decks in this format that will want Wormhole Sweeper. Pinnacle Kill Ship is the common spacecraft. We only have 2 common spacecraft, and both of them are colorless. Pinnacle Kill Ship is the 7 mana 7/7. You need to station it for 7 in order for it to become a creature. But when it enters, it deals 10 damage to up to 1 target creature. So it's an expensive one, but it can become a massive threat at some stage of the game. Wormhole Sleeper is the opposite. It's a 2 mana 2/2 flyer. The station is only 4, and when it enters, it surveils 2. And they represent the sort of 2 ends of the spectrum. One wants to be in this big mana deck that wants to kill by attacking with chunky creatures. The other one is agile, small, and cheap, and fixes your early draw and will be good in those maybe down-to-earth kind of aggressive decks. And well, you wouldn't be happy, So JPSN says that every time someone plays it on turn 2, I'm happy. I had very good curves with the Wormhole Sweeper. That also included the 4/1 Defender somehow. And I do like it in some of my decks. I find that card pretty strong, but it requires a deck. And that's why I want to showcase that Simic is a deck where Pinnacle Kill Ship is the hidden gem at a roughly 60% game and hand win rate, which is really, really high. It provides it with this very much needed hard removal because it basically kills everything in the set, and with threat later in the game, and you don't have a problem with getting to 7 mana. So everything checks for the Pinnacle Kill Ship in Simic. While Wormhole Sweeper, 52% game and hand win rate, absolutely no. Probably you should avoid it. However, I did play Simic decks where Wormhole Sleeper was actively very, very good. Because, I don't know, I managed to get 4 Edge Rovers, the 1 mana 2/2s. And I was playing an aggressive version of Simic. And because of that, Wormhole Sleeper is good because I wanted to kill fast rather than slow. I didn't have the chunkers. In terms of the uncommons, well, best uncommon in Simic is unsurprisingly Biomechan Engineer. 63.7% win rate is sick. We talked about this card seconds ago, so you know what it does, and you know the advantages of being a magnet for removal because no one wants to give you value, and then letting other things that are big threats in your deck to squeeze through. Hidden gem I selected, Mouth of the Storm. Again, we talked about this card in top blue uncommons. It's still underdrafted. The 7 mana 6/6 flyer, 61.6% for a 7-drop and game and hand win rate is impressive. Again, don't sleep on this card. It's perfectly fine finisher for any deck, and it buys you a turn basically. So literally a time walk for 7 mana on the stick. Then the trap I selected is Atmospheric Greenhouse, and it's a trap in most of the archetypes that have green, honestly. It's the 5 mana spacecraft that when it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. For 8 station, it becomes a 5/4 flying trample. 52% win rate, not what you want to be doing in this particular deck. Then we move to Gruul, the second most winning archetype, and Pinnacle Kill Ship is actually the best common for Gruul decks. So clearly, we're talking here about the Pinnacle Kill Ship type of deck in Gruul. So we know now that Gruul wants to be playing big things and proverbially smash. We're not thinking about the Gruul as a down-to-earth aggro deck most of the time. We want to be ramping and putting big stuff on the board and winning through that. Pinnacle Kill Ship, 59.1% win rate. But the hidden gem I selected is the Nebula Dragon. The dragon that is as described by someone as the why the hell would they print this card in the set where there is already a spacecraft that does all the things that Nebula Dragon does, but better. Well, it turns out that the difference in Gruul is not so big because Nebula Dragon has 58.8% win rate. So it's statistically not significant from the Pinnacle kill ship. And sample size is not massive, but I would definitely not ignore this piece of information, and I would try to at least, it doesn't mean that you have to put Nebula Dragon into your Gruul decks, because without them they fail. It just points you more towards what your Gruul decks want to be doing, and they want to be casting Pinnacle kill ships and Nebula Dragons, and probably that means they want to be casting God Maws and other 5-6 drops that are massive. Trap, on the other hand, or played Pangolin, I think that it's possible to build an artifact red-green deck, but I think people tried unsuccessfully so far. I think that if you have a bunch of gene pollinators, or played Pangolin might be actually a good card in it, and then you put other artifacts and it might work. But in most canonical Gruul decks, it's just not going to be great. It's just a vanilla 2/2 most of the time, and their 53% win rate is not impressive in that particular color combination. In terms of the uncommons, Terrapact Intimidator is the best one, 61.6. We talked about it. That's the 2-drop that either is a 4/3 or makes 2 landers. That all of those things are super interesting for you, because even though you're not the down to the ground aggressive deck, Terrapact Intimidator will either provide this early clock and maybe even force opponent to lose the game because they can't handle it properly, or it will give you 2 landers, which, you have a Terrapact Intimidator, which will still probably trade with the 2-drop of the opponent, and then it lets you ramp into the big stuff that you have at the top end of your mana curve. Hidden gem I selected is Use Social Engineering. Most content creators already figured that out. That card is pretty solid. 59.7 game in hand win rate is good. That's better than any common in that color combination. And you get this beautiful play pattern that if you manage to get a lander by 10-3, which, shouldn't be hard if you play Galactic Wayfarers. On turn 4, you can just warp, use Social Engineering, play a land, make a 2/2, sacrifice a lander, make a 2/2. So you basically ended up with 4 mana, make 2 2/2s and ramp. And then because you ramped on turn 5, if you have a land in your hand, you can recast it and play a land, and you get a third 2/2, and you basically built your own Imperial Oath. And this is another way that green decks can be winning in this format. If you have some early drops, but you didn't get those big beefy creatures at your top end, you can use your Social Engineering to go very wide and win the games through very wide board. The trap I selected, at the risk of again having an argument with Kai Buddha about it, because we had that already in Ether Drift with the exhaust creature that became a 5/4, 6/5 haste if you exhausted it by tapping a creature to exhaust it. Galvanizing Soulship is a very similar design. 6 mana for a station, a spacecraft, only 3 to station, so very cheap, and it's a 6/5 flying haste, but it doesn't have any ETB. It's just a dumb beast, and I think maybe the problem with that is that people put it as a top end of their aggressive version of Gruul, and it's not a great thing in that kind of deck, because most of the time people have removal for the big things held up. Maybe it's better if you have multiple big things, and Galvanizing Ship is one of the 5 big things. But then you probably have better targets. You have your Brunter, you have your Godmaw, you have your whichever good green uncommon that is chunky you want to be putting in the deck. And the Galvanizing Soulship is sort of tier 3 of that kind of chunky dumb beast in this set. Also, because maybe, I don't know, artifact removal can get it or something. Then 52% win rate is not impressive at all. Then we have Selesnya. Top common for Selesnya is Focus Fire. That's the white for a deal X+2 damage, where X is the number of creatures and spacecrafts you control instant to attacking or blocking creature, obviously. 59.3 for this one. And this sort of suggests me that, weirdly, this spell is just good enough in an aggressive deck. I think that, you attack with some of your things, you kill their blocker, and because it's only 1 mana, you will still be able to deploy a secondary threat, and that's good. If you would have to spend 2 mana on it and you can't cast anything else, you wouldn't be able to attack. You would have to maybe play to the board. This lets you to both attack, remove the blocker on a key creature, and then still deploy more threats, which keeps the pressure on the opponent. Hidden gem I selected is the Thawbringer. This is the deck for the Thawbringer Selesnya. 3 mana 4/2 that surveils on enter and death trigger. 58.9 solid numbers on it. Definitely start playing it. 1 drop into 2 drop into this is going to be a good curve out. It hits quite strong. 4 power is a lot. It's just 5 turn clock on its own. If you have some ways of controlling the board, maybe bite spells or fight spells of some sorts, it can do quite a lot of damage very quickly. The trap I selected, Exosuit Savior, 3 mana 2/2 flyer. When it enters, return up to 1 permanent you control to its owner's hand. It just looks more like a dirty card that wants you to accrue slow value. And Selesnya, I don't think it wants to be doing that. Selesnya wants to be attacking, wants to be assertive, and wants to put things on board rather than returning them to your hand. Uncommons. Best uncommon is the Rayblade Trooper. 3 mana 2/2. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It has a warp ability, and whenever a creature with +1/+1 counter on it you control dies, you make a 1/1. Yeah, it's just very good. It plays to the minor theme of the color pair, which is putting counters on things and getting some benefits out of it. So yeah, fine card. Very, very strong, actually. 61.8% win rate is pretty high. Gem I selected, and don't get me wrong, I think that everyone knows by now that this card is pretty strong. Sunstar Lightsmith, 4 mana for a 3/3, and whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and draw a card. I only put it here because this card has the second spell synergies, and second spell synergies are in white-blue. But let's not forget that green-white has counter synergies, and it also contributes to the counter synergy theme. But I think more importantly, it is a solid body in white-green that can give you some card advantage later in the game. You can draw a card or maybe 2 out of it, and it's amazing if they don't deal with it. And it bridges between 4-drop is relatively cheap. If you have something bigger, it can bridge those bigger creatures and maybe eat a removal. And I think it's relatively easy to draw a card out of it, and then you're super happy about how that turned out for you. Trap I selected is Dual Sun Technique. Combat trick for 2 mana. Target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn. If it has a +1/+1 counter on it, draw a card. 51.4% game and win rate is very low. And I put it as a trap because it screams +1/+1 counters, but it doesn't work in the +1/+1 counters deck. So what's at home? Probably sideboard. Okay, Azorius. Best common in Azorius is Cryogen Relic. What is it? Ichor Wellplate version for the set. 1 and a blue, enters, draw a card, leaves the battlefield, also draw a card, and you can sacrifice it to put a stun counter on a tap creature. Key card in any blue deck, in my opinion. 59% here, but it's solid in any blue deck. It's there with top commons, and just pick it higher because people still don't pick it very high. Hidden gem I selected is the Ilvoid Gale Blade because it has very good numbers. 57.6%. That's good for Azorius. It's a blue mana for a flash flyer 1/1, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. First of all, blue in the casting cost means that you can double spell very early. You can double spell on turn, well, even 2 if you really want to, but most of the time on turn 2 you won't have any kind of payoffs. But on turn 3, you can do some beautiful things using Ilvoid Galeblade. But also something not to frown about is that because it has flash, it lets you double spell on opponent's turn sometimes. And most of the time it will play out like, I play it, I do some attacks with it, maybe deal like 3 damage, then I just trade it for a card because I need another card to double spell. All of those things are really good for Azorius, and it is in the top 4 commons for that archetype, and maybe people will not pick it highly even if they are in the Azorius deck. The trap I selected, Star Breach Whale, 5 mana for a flying 3/5. When it enters Surveil, and it has Warp for 2 mana. And 53.3% is not atrocious, but it's definitely not impressive. And I think that card suffers from a couple of things, and one of them is Depressurize being really, really good against it. Like you spent 5 mana into making this whale, and then it just dies to a 2 mana spell. And Surveil 2 does not cover for that kind of disproportionate mana usage. All right, and in terms of the uncommons, Codecracker Hound, the better Sipsig Appraiser, is the best uncommon at 61.6. As the hidden gem, I selected Gigastorm Titan. Now, it's not really a hidden gem, I know, because that card has like 2 spells a turn, synergies basically spelled out on the face of it. It costs 3 less to cast if you've cast another spell this turn. So if you cast it as your second or third spell, it will cost 2 mana, and it's a 4/4. So basically, a lot of the time in Azorius, it's going to be a 2 mana 4/4, and a couple of those can take over the game very, very quickly. I put it as a hidden gem because that card is still going relatively late, and I think that it's not being put in any other decks. Although I did play it in Dimir Trophy deck. It was quite good in there because 2 mana 4/4 turns out it's good in any deck. But it goes quite late, being strong, and that's why I put it in the hidden gem. More as I'm putting it out there that it might be a good reward for being in Azorius that you can sort of semi-reliably get in the draft quite late. If you are in that lane, you have to keep in mind that you might be rewarded with the Gigastorm Titan that is performing very well at 60% game and hand win rate. Trap I selected, Mechan Assembler. Mainly selected as a trap because people play it in Azorius decks often enough for me to call it too often. Mechan Assembler is a 5 mana 4/4. Whenever another artifact you control enters, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token, and this ability only triggers once each turn. 52.2 just doesn't have very good numbers in Azorius, and people still tend to play it. So maybe this is not the way you should be building your Azorius deck. Orzhov, the best common, Banishing Light. Don't you love it when good old Banishing Light is a top common for a color combination? But Banishing Light has advantages in this format. There's not much enchantment removal, which means that a lot of the time it's going to be just 3 mana murder. And turns out it's good enough in this set. 59% win rate for a common is not terrible. Hidden gem I selected is Perigi Beckoner. 5 mana 4/5. When it enters until end of turn, another target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gets the whenever it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control kind of ability. And it has Warp for 1 and a black. And there are so many mini combos with this card. There is this 3/1 that when it enters, it kills something and its controller draws 2 cards, or if it, or it kills something that was dealt damage. But because it can target your stuff, you can cast the Warp the Perigi Beckoner, give your, Virus Beetle +2/+0, attack with the Virus Beetle. No one is going to block that Virus Beetle. No one wants to, kill it so that it comes back and discards a card. And because of that, you would just deal 3 damage. Then you can cast the thing, kill your Virus Beetle, draw 2 cards, Virus Beetle enters, they discard a card, you just got like a massive value out of it. And lots of play patterns like that. It's good to, I don't know, there's the Swarm, the 2/4 that when it taps, you can sacrifice a creature and then draw a card. Again, you cast the Perigi Beckoner on something that you can sacrifice later to the 2/4, draw a card out of the 2/4, and then recoup an ETB effect from the thing that you sacrificed. So lots of things happening in the Orzhov space where Beckoner can be good. I've seen some amazing games with it. Also, the fact that his Warp can be useful sometimes. 5 mana 4/5 that already provided you with tons of value is not a bad deal. So yeah, just keep an eye on this card and think hard about how you can utilize it the optimal way, because there are so many ways. I've seen such beautiful play patterns with this card, and I think that maybe this might be still a bit underexplored by you in those early days. The trap I selected is Pinnacle Killship. Orzhov is definitely not one of those archetypes when Pinnacle Killship is the most important card. 49.1. So definitely not a Pinnacle Killship archetype. That doesn't mean that there are no decks in Orzhov that will be good in using Pinnacle Killship, but the canonical white-black deck is not going to be very good at utilizing the card. Uncommons, best one, Dubious Delicacy, 63% game and hand win rate, sick. Just play it. Hidden Gem, Fell Grafship, the lifelink flying Gravedigger spacecraft. I talked about it earlier when I was talking about the best black uncommons, and to a big part, it's one of the best black uncommons because it's so good in Orzhov. 60.4% game and hand win rate, and the card is still going relatively late for an uncommon. So definitely start updating and upgrading the pick orders for this card, especially when you're in Orzhov. Trap I selected, Don't Strike Vanguard. That's a 6 mana 4/5 lifelinker. And it has, at the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control other than this creature. I think that what this card is suffering from is that big creatures are good in this format, which means that the times that this is the biggest thing on the board are not going to be as common as maybe you would have expected before the format was released. 50% game and hand win rate, not optimal, especially for a card that, Orzhov, you might see Orzhov as a kind of a deck where having 2 tapped creatures at the end of the turn is not going to be uncommon. And yet, it doesn't look very good in terms of the numbers. All right, Golgari, the famous graveyard archetype. I'm joking. Obviously, the graveyard theme is not existent. The support for it is non-existent. Once in 1,000 draft, maybe you're going to get a proper Golgari graveyard deck, but don't hold your breath for that. Best common is a Galactic Wayfarer at 58.9, and not a very impressive win rate for a common. Hidden Gem I selected is Fungal Colossus, 7 mana for a 5/5, and it has a win rate of 58.4. It also costs less to cast for each, 1 mana less to cast for each different named land you control. So that suggests to me that there is a Golgari many colors deck or Golgari multicolor plus utility lands kind of a deck where that Fungal Colossus is going to be good. But I will definitely mark that this is based on a pretty small sample size. Maybe it's just a fluke that Fungal Colossus was good in there. And it's definitely a suggestion that this kind of Golgari multicolor deck is not something that will come together very frequently. Trap I selected is Intrepid Tenderfoot, the 2-drop 2/2. For 3 mana, you can put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, activate only a sorcery. 52.4 is not a high win rate. It does suggest to me that the Golgari doesn't want to be doing beatdown that scales till the late game. Golgari wants to play maybe kind of a value deck that will allow some splashing because of the lander tokens you acquire from playing green cards. Uncommon, best uncommon in Golgari, Monoist Circuit Feeder. Now, this is a bit surprising because you don't think of Golgari as the artifact deck, and the Monoist Circuit Feeder is better the more artifact you have. But maybe that is a suggestion that you should be putting artifacts in your Golgari decks rather than focusing on the graveyard synergies. 60% game on hand win rate, quite high. Hit the gem I selected, Harmonious Grove Strider. Yeah, again, another thing that suggests that Golgari will try to play this big creature game. Best uncommon being a 6-drop and second best uncommon being a 5-drop that grows into something that should be an 8-drop. Trap I selected, Caesarian Dirgecraft, 5 mana for a spacecraft that can be turned to a 4/3/4/7 station value, and when it enters, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature. 52.6. I think that this just rate on this thing is not good enough. Maybe if it was costing 4 mana, it would be quite playable, but at 5 mana, it's just not good enough, I guess. Dimir, top card, Cryogen Relic, 61.2. And that 61.2 suggests me just how important Cryogen Relic is, especially when you know that the second best common, according to the data for now, is the Grafpak Monoist at 58.1. So it's like 3 percentage points difference between the best common and the second best common. Tells me that you shouldn't probably consider playing Dimir without having Cryogen Relics, and maybe in multiples in your deck. Grafpak Mono is, by the way, that's the 3-drop 2/1 flyer, and when it dies into a 2/2 colorless robot creature token. Again, solid because it is a natural 2/1 that lets you survive those early games, and I think that Dimir wants to survive those early games and control them, and Monoist provides you with tools for that. And sometimes it will just be a brawler, 2/1 flyer. Who can block that kind of thing? The trap I selected is the Swarm Color, the 2/4 I was talking just about. That when it becomes tapped, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact if you do draw a card. 52.3 means that probably this is not what you should be focusing in Dimir. You have already a good 4-drop that will draw you a card, and it's called Selfcraft Mechan, and it works fine with Cryogen Relic. And Swarm Color is just not that kind of impactful card, so you'd rather focus on having your Selfcraft Mechans and getting your card draw from Cryogen Relic. In terms of uncommons, Dubious Delicacy is number 1, but number 2, and not by far, is Dauntless Scrapbot, the 3 mana artifact colorless creature. It's a 3/1 for 3, and when it enters, you exile each opponent's graveyard, only opponents, not your own, and you create a lander. And this makes a very good impression of the Galactic Wayfarer in decks that don't play green. 61.2% is a very, very high win rate. And I think that people are still very much sleeping on that card. It goes quite late in draft, even though it looks premier. And occasionally it will completely hose your opponent's strategy by randomly exiling their graveyard that they were relying on. Trap card I selected is Hymn of the Faller. And part of it is because I absolutely don't think it's a trap. I had that card in my decks that were Dimir, and the card was very, very good. And I think that there is a difference between this sort of like more proactive tempo kind of Dimir aggressive control, as hard as it is. Like, you know, I can put like a threat and start killing the rest, and just that one small threat early is going to do so much damage that I'm going to win the game. And Hymn of the Faller is a great card in those because you are offensive, opponent is defensive, paying 1 life that you have to for the Hymn of the Faller. By the way, Hymn of the Faller, 2 mana for Surveil, draw a card and lose 1 life. But if you have Void, you draw an extra card. So you will draw 2 cards for that, but you will lose 1 life. And I think if you're playing more aggressive, proactive version of Dimir, which exists, and I've played it, and I trophied with it, then Hymn of the Faller is good. However, you're playing a very reactive, defensive one, that 1 life might be a cost, and then often you will not have capability of triggering Void in the same turn, and then, you know, it's much easier to trigger Void when you're doing the attacking, because that will lead to blocks, and blocks will lead to trades, than if you're defensive and you're not attacking, and creatures die on your opponent's turn. So yeah, You have to think about, am I the beatdown more often than not? If you are, then Hymn of the Follower would be great. And if you are, oh no, I'm sitting back and blocking, then Hymn of the Follower is going to be a much weaker card because you won't be able to reliably trigger that kind of the Void. And I think that for this card to be good, you have to trigger Void, and then it becomes good. Okay, Rakdos. The problem with Rakdos is that it doesn't have well-performing commons, and I think that this problem is linked to general quality of the commons rather than people not putting the right cards together. Best common is the Grafpak Monoiz, the 2-1 flyer that we talked about seconds ago, but it only has like 57.6% win rate, which is not impressive at all. Hidden Gem, I selected the Beckoner again at 57.1. As in Orzhov, I think that this card does pretty nice things in Rakdos if you play it right. You can sacrifice things, you can make attacks that are hard for the opponent to judge, and you have same kind of combos with being able to sacrifice creatures in order to get them back. By the way, I didn't mention Beckoner is also good against the opposing Cryo Shatter. If they play Cryo Shatter on your creature and you have a Beckoner somewhere, you can just give +2/+0 to the creature under the Cryo Shatter, attack with it, it taps, it dies, it comes back, everyone is happy. Trap I selected, and this is generally, I think, a trap. It has bad numbers in multiple archetypes, is the Red Tiger Mechan. 4 mana, 3/3 haste, and you can warp it for 2 mana. Here, particularly atrocious at 49% game and hand win rate, but in all the other red archetypes, it didn't perform fantastically either. Best uncommon in Rakdos, Terrapact Intimidator. We talked about it at length. It's 2 mana 4/3 is just good, and if it gives you landers, you can still use them in a good way. The Hidden Gem I selected is my combo piece for the Beckoner. Faller's Faithful, 3 mana for a 3/1. When it enters, destroy up to 1 target creature. If that creature wasn't dealt damage this turn, its controller draws 2 cards. So you can, again, kill something of your own to draw 2 cards. With the Beckoner, you can kill it and have it return, which is also neat. Lots of nice combos. And, sometimes they play this Godmaw 6/6 that, will take over the game next turn. You just cast it, kill it, and just don't worry about the fact that they drew 2 cards. You were probably more dead from being killed by the creature you killed. But think about how to use it. Think how to utilize it efficiently. And this card is very multi-purpose and very modular, modal, which means that I bet that better players on 17Lands will win disproportionately more games when they draw the Faller's Faithful. Try to put it in your range. The question you ask yourself, if you have that card in your deck, what am I supposed to do with it most frequently? Should I use it as a death spell? Am I running a low to the ground weenie and the Faithful will let me kill big creatures that block because they will deal damage? Or am I on the market to sacrificing my own stuff to draw cards and use it as a Village Rites that is a 3/1 on the stick? And then Trap, again, Galvanizing Soulship at 49.7. Yeah, really bad numbers on that. And that so much reminds me of the same thing in Ether Drift. Because as with this one, people were saying, oh, well, that looks really, really good. Like the hasty threat, whatever. I think that the problem is with red, not with the card. I think that if that card was green, it would have been excellent. But because it's red, it's just not. Because, again, not on the plan, not enough big things in red that will, allow it to pass through the cracks. Second lowest win rate archetype. And again, win rates for the commons are pretty low. But the best one is Cellcraft Mechan, which tells me, yes, this deck wants to be doing artifact things. 57.7. Hidden Gem, just below the Cellcraft Mechan, is the Zookeeper Mechan. So basically, if it has Mechan in the name, it's good, is it? Zookeeper Mechan, the red mana dork, at 57.9, which is not impressive, but it just has a low win rate. That's why it will never be impressive in there. But that points towards, you know what? I want to play more mid-range to late game rather than super early aggression. And I think a lot of people will fall into the trap of thinking that Izzet is this super aggressive deck. But I think all this top commons suggest that it should be focusing on mid-range value generation rather than on ultra aggression and then playing the Signpost uncommon or something. Signpost uncommon that, by the way, has a pretty bad win rate. So maybe you should revisit how you build Izzet decks in your head and click into a different plane of how you want to attack with Izzet decks. And I think that because Alex trophied with them a couple of times, just go to the VODs of Quarter Calls and try to figure out what Alex was doing in order to figure out what is making Izzet tick. Or take a deeper dive onto the data, because the data will have some answers to that. You just need to interpret it and figure out what is doing well in Izzet decks. Trap I selected, Slag Drill Scrapper, red for a 1/2, 2 mana and a tap, sacrifice another artifact or land, you draw a card. It has 53%, which is not that markedly worse than Zookeeper Mechan, but it is on the lower end of the spectrum of a not well-performing deck. And I think that part of it is that maybe people play it in the aggressive artifact decks rather than in the grindy decks. I don't know. It just doesn't do very well, and people put it a lot in their decks. Best uncommon, Terrapact Intimidator. Again, I think every single red archetype had Terrapact Intimidator as the top uncommon. Here it has 60% win rate. And then think about it, the top common was 57.7. So that's a big difference there. Card is strong, and is Head and Shoulders the best card in the archetype in terms of commons and uncommons. Hidden Gem I selected, but already like at 57.4 is the Mouth of the Storm. Another thing that points me towards Izzet wanting to play the bigger game and spending more mana rather than being super aggressive. And the Trap, again, another card that potentially suggests that it's not going to be like, shouldn't focus too much on the artifact synergies. Steel Swarm Operator, the 2 mana 1/1 flyer, and it taps for blue, but you can only use it to cast artifact spell, or it can tap for blue, and then you can spend it only to activate abilities of artifacts, which most of the time is going to be sacrificing lander tokens in this set. I think that the fact that it gives 2 mana to sacrifice an artifact, but there's not that many artifact to activate the artifact ability, but there's not so many of those artifact abilities in the format is contributing to why this card is not great. If we would have a more pronounced theme of being able to activate artifact abilities, would have been much better. Like, imagine if that was in Lost Caverns of Ixalan and would allow you to use that mana for crafting of your artifacts. All right, and we move to the last color combination, Boros. Boy, oh boy, is Boros not understood or bad. Best common so far is the Cav Landseeker, 55.2% win rate, majestically. That's downright bad. I didn't even select the hidden gem. I don't think that there is a hidden gem at common in this archetype. It's just like everything looks pretty bad. I mean, 55.2, and like Orbital Plunge is just behind it at 55.1 or something. This is not enough for commons to contribute to that archetype significantly. And I think that, yeah, there may be a big red-white kind of Boros deck that is more controlling, but I think people are trying to build it according to the Signpost, and the Signpost is bad, and that theme in general looks moderately bad. So, Trap I selected is Bombard because it has very bad win rate. That's why 50.5, despite being, I think, perfectly serviceable spell, but something doesn't click with Boros in there. We found one red archetype that does not have the Terrapact Intimidator as the top uncommon, because here we have the All Fates Stalker, the whatever this archetypical O-ring creature is. It has 57.8% game in hand win rate, which is not impressive at all for an uncommon. But I guess if you're playing this big Boros late game deck, it will be probably even better in those. Hidden Gem, I selected Cavron Harrier, red for a 2/1, and whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 2 to create a colorless robot artifact creature token, sacrifice it at the end of combat. 56.5 is not great, but I just decided that, okay, but this is not played frequently. Maybe there is something in there. Maybe that's the necessary condition to fulfill to draft Boros aggressive deck, to have a couple of those Cavron Harriers. Trap I selected is the Vault Guard Trooper, 5 mana for Fiend Hunter. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you, my MTG Diversity. Fiend Hunter is the archetypical creature that exiles something until it leaves the battlefield. Vault Guard Trooper, the 5 mana 5/5. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. I don't know, maybe this card's bad numbers is not due to the card being bad itself, but people overbuilding on the theme of the color pair, which means that having those 2 tapped creatures. And I think that this theme is basically a miss. So maybe there's some interesting space with it for the later format when we can solve it. But for now, I would probably advise you to actually avoid Boros if you can. It has lowest win rate despite being underdrafted, which means that maybe there is not much in it. And maybe there is a build, but I don't know. I don't feel competent enough to figure it out. Maybe you're better than that. So you can tell me how to build Boros in order for it to be successful. All right. And I told you that Mark Anderson said that you will have the sweeper decks and you will have the killship decks. So I looked at that. In each color combination, I looked at what has the better win rate, the Pinnacle Killship or the Wormtail Sweeper. And first of all, every single green color combination, Killship is better than the Sweeper. Black-green, it doesn't even have enough to have a win rate. I assume that it's going to be lower than 56.6% that the Killship has. So first of all, 2 best archetypes, because I kept the order from the best to the worst. 2 best archetypes decisively are Pinnacle Killship decks. Around 60% win rate in Simic and in Gruul shows me that these decks actively want a Pinnacle Killship, while 52 and 50% win rate for the Wormwool Sweeper means that you probably don't want to be putting them in your deck. Selesnya, different story here. The win rates are actually quite close to each other. 57 for the Killship and 56 for the Sweeper. So I think that either they can play both of them equally well, or there is the Selesnya Sweeper and Selesnya Killship decks. Now, this is a question for later format, but it's good to know that both of them do relatively well. Azorius, on the other hand, is definitely a Wormwool Sweeper deck. 57.5, the highest win rate for the Sweeper in every 2-color combination, but only 53.5 for the Pinnacle Killship. So Azorius is definitely a Sweeper archetype. Wormwool Sweeper. Orzhov, also a Sweeper deck, but it's not great in Orzhov. Judging the small difference in the win rate between Azorius and Orzhov, there is a 4 percentage point difference between how much Sweeper wins in Azorius and Orzhov, which makes me think that Azorius and Orzhov just don't want either, basically. But if you would have to choose, you would prefer Sweeper in this deck, mainly because Pinnacle Killship is atrociously bad at 49% in Orzhov decks. Black-green, we only have the data for Pinnacle Killship at 56.6. But if other archetypes are anything to judge by, probably the Sweeper is going to have 55, 54% win rate in Golgari. Dimir, 56.7 and 52.4 for the Killship and Sweeper respectively. So it's clearly a Pinnacle Killship deck. And the bottom 3 archetypes, they are all close relatively. I mean, Rakdos and Izzet are more Pinnacle Killship. White-red is more sweeper deck, but they are close to each other, and those decks are not very good anyway. I mean, they have a pretty low win rate, so it's hard to judge what needs to be done. Now, having said that, I do think that there will be decks in each color combination that want the sweeper, and decks in each color combination that want the pinnacle killship. It's more of the philosophy, and those win rate differences between those two cards are going to point you more towards what canonical version of the deck wants to be doing rather than what your particular deck wants to be doing. You need to be able to evaluate what your deck wants to be doing, and is the sweeper or the killship more into that plan. All right, and with that, thanks to 17Lands, because would we have early data without the 17Lands? No. So thanks to all the people involved in making sure that it happens. There is a lot of work going on in the early format to make sure that everything is immaculate. Also, thanks to Fake Jake Brown for designing my logo and supporting this podcast with his expertise, knowledge, and wisdom for many, many, many episodes. Yeah, just to remember Fake Jake, because he's not playing Magic anymore. And I think that sometimes it's easy that someone stopped playing Magic and all of a sudden they don't exist because they are not having this common topic to talk about with us. I do remember Jake's existence, and I do try to interact with him despite him not playing Magic, because I liked him not because he plays Magic, but because he's a very lovely person. And I think that dare I say, wisdom should be applied to many more people that we know. And with that, on that very big bombshell, I'm going to end the episode, and next week we can return and look at maybe more specific two-color data and try to find the best homes for each card in the set. But until then, goodbye.